The festival of Chanukah is upon us. And we have, of course, the mitzvah to light Chanukah candles for 8 nights to remember and to publicize the wonderful miracle that happened many years ago to the Maccabees, to the Hasmoneans in the Second Temple era. The Greeks, the Assyrian Greeks, they took over the land. They defiled the temple, but the Jews fought back. They pummeled the Greeks. They won the war, and they came to the temple, and they restored its holiness. But before they could produce sufficient oil to use in the Menorah, they only found one vial, one flask, one jug of oil that had the stamp of the high priest. It was pure. It was not defiled. And it was supposed to light for 1 night, but it lit for 8. And the sages appreciated and understood this miracle, and they enacted a festival of praise of God, of thanks for God for 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of Kislev. 8 days where there can be no eulogies and no fast days. It's celebration days, days of thanks and of praise, and of course, the mitzvah to light the Chanukah candles. What's this mitzvah? So the Talmud tells us that there is variability. The mitzvah is every single night for 8 nights to light 1 candle. That's the basic mitzvah. But if you want to improve on the basic mitzvah, you want to do even more, you want to have a better performance of the mitzvah, well, then every inhabitant of the house lights a single candle. And if you want to do even more, not just subsist with the basic mitzvah and even the mehadrin, the better version, you want to do the best version, well, then you light in ascending or descending order according to the opinion of Beis Shammai. You start with 8 on the first night, 7 on the second night, and so on until you end up with 1 on the last night. But of course, we follow the opinion of the Academy of Hillel. You start night number 1 with 1 candle and you ascend. The second night is 2 until you culminate on the final night of Chanukah with 8 lights, with the menorah being full, 8 candles. So of course, we're all familiar with the basic contours of this festival. A miracle happened 2,200 plus years ago, and we relive it and we publicize it each year for 8 nights, the 8 nights of Chanukah. Today I want to try to understand the depths of both the miracle and the mitzvah, but of course, the essence of the festival. And we'll start with some questions. And question number 1 is, wait a minute, a miracle. This is a miracle. To have oil that is supposed to last only 1 day, to have it last for 8, that's a miracle. But I hate to break it to you. Miracles were ever present in the temple. They happened all the time. There were loads of miracles that happened with regularity in the temple. The Mishnah in the book of Pirkei Avos, it lists 10 ever-present miracles that happened in the temple. Number 1, even though there was a wafting aroma of delicious, succulent meat, and there were so many people who were always on the temple grounds, and sometimes we know if a woman, she smells the aroma of food, she could get a craving for it, and she could even, if she's pregnant, she could lose the baby. Never happened in the temple. Miracle number 1. Miracle number 2, if you have unrefrigerated meat, it could spoil. Never happened in the temple. Number 3, if you have lots of meat, you'll have lots of flies. And in the butcher house in the temple, there was never a single fly. Miracle number 3. Number 4, the high priest. The high priest who has to do the work on Yom Kippur, but would become disqualified if he had a seminal emission. In 830 years of the temple's reign, it never happened once. And the altar the Mizbeach was outdoors. And outdoors, well, there's rain. And there were fires on top of the altar. But the rain never extinguished any of the fires. And the pillar of smoke was never swayed by wind. And the sacrifices that we do on Pesach and on Shavuos and the weekly showbreads, so the Omer on Pesach, the Shtei Alechem that we offer on Shavuos, and the showbreads that are done each week, they never became impure. And when the whole nation gathered in the temple, they would be so packed together, because there's so many people, and it's not really big enough that everyone can have tons of space. But when they would bow before God, there was plenty of room suddenly. Omdim tzfufim, they would stand all packed together, but when they bowed down, there's plenty of room for everyone. A miracle. In the times of the temple, it was never once an injury as a result of a snake bite or a scorpion bite in Jerusalem, and there was always room for another bed. No matter how many people come to Jerusalem, you always find some place to stay. It may not be the Ritz. It may not be even the King David Hotel. But there's always place for people to stay. 10 miracles that happened in the temple. So miracles happened all the time in the temple. What's the big deal that we have this 8-day miracle? The oil outlasted its expected illumination. It's a miracle. It's nice, but miracles, well, that's the bread and butter of the temple. Miracles were ubiquitous in the temple. So we have a miracle. It's a nice miracle, but why does it engender an 8-day festival? Now you may say, okay, you give me a nice list of miracles, but this is oil. And oil has symbolism. And this is a special miracle of oil, so we do the miracle, so we celebrate the miracle. Well, that wasn't so rare either. Are you ready to hear what the Talmud tells us in the book of Yoma on page 39a? During the high priesthood of Shimon the righteous, the Talmud lists several miracles that happened. Whenever he had to select which of the goats will be offered for God on Yom Kippur and which will be thrown off the cliff, the scapegoat, so he has to pick out lots. And the one in his right hand, the dominant hand, always was for God. And the one on the left, the weaker hand, was always the scapegoat chucked off a cliff. And on Yom Kippur, they would tie red strings both in the temple and where they chucked the scapegoat off the rocky cliff. And the red string always turned white to indicate the purification, the atonement, the expiation, the absolving of our sins. And the western lamp, the western candle of the menorah always remained lit. It never became extinguished. So here we have a miracle that relates to the menorah that no one knows about. Or, let me clarify, very few people know about. Why is one miracle of the menorah celebrated? We have 8 days of celebration. The festival, Chanukah, maybe the most widely observed or widely known, certainly in the general world, festival that we have. What's the big deal? By the way, the Talmud lists several other miracles as well. And there's another high priest who had an even greater miracle in the menorah. The name of this high priest was Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, and he testified, when I served as high priest, there were miracles in the menorah. They would light the menorah on Rosh Hashanah, and it would not get extinguished until the next Rosh Hashanah. 8 days, that's nice. What about 350 plus days? It's either 354 or maybe 385, depends if there's a leap year. 8 days, that's child's play. We have a source a documentation of the menorah lasting a whole year. What is this big deal that we make out of the menorah lasting for 8 nights? Why do we have this celebration? Question number 1. Question number 2 comes from Aaron. In the book of Numbers, we read about the dedication of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. The Mishkan, of course, was a portable version of the temple that was built by Moshe, by Bezalel. It takes up a very large part of the Torah. And when the Mishkan was finally finished and it was inaugurated at the end of Parshas Naso, so this is towards the beginning of the book of Numbers, of Bamidbar, we read about the 12 days of dedication. For 12 days after the Mishkan was inaugurated, the 12 tribes, the heads of the tribes, the princes of the tribes, each brought on 12 successive days a tribute to the Mishkan. Now there was one tribe that was missing, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Aaron. Because Joseph was split into 2, Jacob has 12 sons. Joseph is split into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. So Ephraim and Manasseh are each featured in this 12-day celebration. But the tribe of Levi, from which the Levites come and the Kohanim come, Aaron the high priest, he has no role in that. So after the Torah lists the 12 days of tributes and the 12 gifts that were brought by the 12 heads of the tribes, and there's no mention of the Levites, we read Parshas Beha'aloscha. God tells Moshe, tell Aaron, when you light the menorah, make sure they all point to the middle. It talks about the menorah. And our sages tell us, Rashi talks about this, the Ramban talk about it. What's the juxtaposition of the tributes of the princes and the mitzvah of the menorah? And our sages explain that when Aaron, he saw the tributes of the princess, he felt bad. He says, with his 12 tribes, and we're not present, we're not participating. And God comforted and consoled Aaron and says, don't worry about them. Don't worry about the 12 tributes that they're bringing for 12 days, the heads of all the tribes. You have something much more special. You have the menorah. You light the candles in the menorah in the temple. So don't feel bad that you didn't participate in the inauguration tributes of the princes of the various tribes. You have something even better. That's what Rashi says at the beginning of Parshas Ba'aloscha, and explains the juxtaposition of the end of Parshas Naso, where the princes brought 12 successive days of tributes. Aaron was not present. Don't worry, Aaron, you have something even greater. You have the menorah. That's what Rashi says, citing from our sages. The Ramban, he says, I don't understand. Why is this, the lighting of the menorah in the temple, why is this the right way to comfort Aaron? There are so many things that Aaron does that none of the other tribes can do. So why is this the activity of the high priest that the Almighty is highlighting? The parsha could have started and say, don't worry, Aaron, you didn't participate in the tributes. You bring the ketores, the incense. Or you bring all the sacrifices. Or you do the work on Yom Kippur. Or you have the meal offerings. You go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. There is a whole slew of activities that Aaron does that no one else does. That Aaron and his family do and no one else does. So the Ramban says, I'm going to explain to you what the Midrash is actually saying. The Midrash says that God's comforting Aaron. Oh, you have something which is greater, which is better. You light the candles, the menorah. That's not referring to the menorah that Aaron lit and the Kohanim lit each day. The high priest lit it each day in the Mishkan and subsequently in the temple. No, that's not what it's referring to. This is referring to the miracle of the Hasmoneans, of the Maccabees, who were Kohanim, who were priests, and thus direct descendants of Aaron. the inauguration of the Mishkan is great. And the celebrations and the festivities and the tributes are amazing. But you know what's even greater? The re-inauguration, the rededication that will be done 1,000 years later by Aaron's descendants. The fact that the Greeks came and defiled the temple, and the Hasmoneans came and fixed it, and rededicated it, that second rededication, says the Ramban, that is what God is comforting Aaron about. The Chanukah miracle, the Chanukah story, the Chanukah dedication is greater, says the Ramban. That's how he interprets the Midrash. It's greater than the initial dedication of the Mishkan. Now, this is a baffling statement, because to say that in not even the first temple, this is not the Mishkan, built by Moshe, not the first temple, which was way holier than the second temple. This is in the second temple, after it's defiled. We have a rabbinic mitzvah, this remembering of this event. To say that's greater than the initial construction of the Mishkan? The Mishkan, the tabernacle, was never destroyed. It's the only temple that was never destroyed. It was pure holiness. Yet, the Ramban is telling us that the rededication of the second temple by the Hasmoneans was greater. How so? Question number 2. So miracles are nice. We see lots of them in the temple. What's special about this one? We see the Chanukah story is very nice, very special, but it's hard for us to imagine that this supersedes the initial dedication of the tabernacle. And this is ample comfort to Aaron. Let's move on to question number 3. So when we think about Chanukah, we think about the Greeks. Greeks come, and they have their ideology, they have the Hellenism, they try to focus on the body, they ignore the soul, they make their gymnasiums, their Olympic games, they forget about God. And they're this evil menace, they take over the land of Israel, and they come to the temple, the sacrosanct epicenter of holiness in the world. And they defile it, and they shatter and smash all the elements of holiness. And they try to stifle the religion. They make all these decrees. You can't study Torah, you can't do a circumcision, and so on. And the Jews get fed up. And they launch a rebellion, and they win the war, quite improbably. And we have this incredible miracle. The oil should have lasted for only 1 day, lasted for 8. That's the story that we're told. That's the story that the Talmud tells us about the clash of the Hasmoneans against the Greeks, the clash of the descendants of Aaron, who led the rebellion and triumphed over the Greeks. And we celebrate that each year in Chanukah. But we find a puzzling midrash. It says, actually, no. The Greeks represent something much more fundamental. The Chanukah story really is not just about the Jews, the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees versus the Greeks. It stems from something way, way more fundamental and deeper, much more elementary. In the 2nd verse of the Torah, we read how the land was empty and desolate and dark and on the surface of the depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering. It's a very difficult verse to understand what exactly is the meaning of every part of this verse, but it's the beginning of the Torah. It's, of course, full of secrets. But the world's barren, it's empty, it's desolate, it's dark, and there's depth of darkness. There's a lot going on there, but it's describing the world in its early stages. The Midrash tells us that these descriptions are about the exiles. The nation, the Jewish nation, will experience exiles. We'll have to overcome challenges. We'll face obstacles. And primarily 4 different exiles. When the verse says that the land was empty, was barren, that's a reference to the suffering of the nation at the hands of the Babylonians. And when it says it was desolate, that's a reference to the suffering of the nation in Persia and Media. V'choshech, and darkness, ze galus Yavan. This is the exile at the hands of the Greeks. Because they brought darkness to the nation with their terrible decrees. And when the verse says on the face of the depths, that's a reference to the final exile, the exile of Edom. I thought that Chanukah was about the triumph of the Hasmoneans over the Greeks, which happened 2,300 years ago or so. Here, the second verse of the Torah, from the very beginning of Genesis, there's some element, there's some force of the Greeks that is already present. So the conflict and the triumph of Chanukah, it's not 2,300 years old. It goes back to the very beginning, to the fabric of Genesis. There's some force that is embodied by the Greeks, certainly, but is present at a very early stage. It seems like, even before Adam is introduced, that there really isn't much of a grace period. Before there's any light, if you will, there's already darkness that needs to be overcome. So what exactly did the Greeks represent that was so elementary, so endemic to our world? It appears in verse 2 of Genesis. Now, if we understand what the Greeks represented with their darkness, there's something very powerful here. If the Greeks' darkness is reflective of verse 2 of Genesis, that means that the lessons of Chanukah, the light overcoming the darkness, if you will, that is not only addressing what happened with the Greeks, but it's also going back to the state of the world, the state of existence, of created existence, that is, in verse 2 of Genesis. The description of the world being undeveloped, barren, desolate, empty, dark. And then the light coming and changing that was done, that was accomplished to some degree, by the Hasmoneans. So if we discover what the Greeks represent and what the Hasmoneans did, we're also discovering the fundamental flaw, so to speak, that was present in verse 2 of Genesis. So it's much more expansive than simply an event that happened, an isolated, discrete event that happened in the Second Temple era. So the lessons, I think, of Chanukah, if we read this, it's certainly more broader to the war and even the miracle. There's something much more fundamental. And finally, I want to contrast two mitzvos that involve candles and light. There are two mitzvos that we have to light candles. Every Friday afternoon before Shabbos, we light Shabbos candles. 8 nights a year, we light Chanukah candles. Both of them, by the way, are rabbinic mitzvos. But if you compare these two, you'll find that they're very different. It's almost as if they're opposites. The Rambam, when he talks about the laws of lighting candles, and he has the laws of lighting Shabbos candles and the laws of lighting Chanukah candles, he says literally opposite things about them. I'll read it to you in Hebrew, so you know I'm not fudging it. Mutar lehishtamish b'ner shel Shabbos. It is permissible to benefit from the light of the Shabbos candles. That's what he writes by the laws of Shabbos candles. By the laws of Chanukah candles, he says, Asar lehishtamish b'ner Chanukah. It is forbidden to use the light of Chanukah. Literally the opposite. One we can use, one we cannot use. Difference number one. The mitzvah of Chanukah candles, you have to light it inside your house or on the outside, but the point is the direction must be outwardly. It's lighted by a window or by the entrance of your house, but it has to be facing the outside. The direction is outward facing. Whereas the Shabbos candles are supposed to be on the inside. You're supposed to have light inside on Shabbos. On Chanukah, it's supposed to be on the outside for public exhibition. When are you supposed to light the candles? So again, we find exact opposites. Shabbos candles must be lit during daytime. Cannot light it on Shabbos. It has to be before nighttime. Chanukah candles must be after nighttime. Again, literally opposites. Moreover, the purpose of Chanukah candles are to light. You light them if it gets extinguished. That's it. You don't have to deal with it. The mitzvah is the ignition of the candles. Whereas the mitzvah of the Shabbos candles are about having the light, benefiting from the light. There's more differences. I don't want to give you too many details. It's hard to keep track of all the details. But on Shabbos, there is no dynamism to the mitzvah. There's no variability. We don't have that. It's mitzvah. You could do one or one for every person or go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 and so on. There's no variability. Here there is variability. And finally, this is a very interesting distinction. They're both very important mitzvos that the law states that if you don't have any money to buy candles, you should go and beg, knock on doors so you have enough money to raise money to light candles. However, when it comes to the Chanukah candles, it says an additional law that you must even sell the shirt on your back. That does not appear by the other mitzvah of Shabbos candles. So there's lots of differences between the Shabbos candles and the Chanukah candles. They must symbolize something very different. So let us begin. Light is symbolic of all these good things. Light of Torah, light of mitzvos, light of God, light of our soul. In fact, there is a verse. Our soul. The verse in Mishlei in Proverbs tells us, Proverbs 20:27, Ner Hashem nishmas adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. Chofes kol chadrei batim, which searches out the chambers of one's innards. The soul is light, but it's light that is embedded deep within a person, searching out the person's innards. If you've read my book, which I'm sure you have, Upon a 10-string tarp, I spent a lot of time on this verse and the implications of it. Our soul. It is, according to our sages, it is hewn from the throne of God. Our soul is more holy, more spiritually supreme and powerful than even the angels. The Talmud tells us that David writes in Psalms, Baruchi nafshi es Hashem. Let my soul praise God. Our soul can praise God. Nothing else can. Because nothing else has any similarity or overlap at all with God. And the Talmud lists 5 similarities that exist between God and our soul. The angels are much more spiritual than us, but they're not at all similar to God. They're more godly than our bodies, but they're not quite as godly, as similar to God as our soul. And thus the best thing that can praise God is the human soul. On some level, the Talmud tells us the purity of our soul rivals or is parallel in some way to the purity of God. Now again, very important to stress. God is a creator. Our soul is a creation. Don't make the mistake of saying, God forbid, that our soul is some part of God. That's heresy. Our soul is godly. It's the thing most similar to God. But of course, if someone says that God has parts, they are excluding themselves from our religion. Very important. I've heard people say, well, your soul's a piece of God. Be very careful when you say that, because by doing that, you are excluding yourself from our religion. You're out. Sorry, you're out. even if it's done with good intentions. The thing most similar to God, most elevated, is our soul. But it is a creation. It's not a creator. There's only one creator. Hashem Echad, only one. No parts, no pieces. Sorry, forgive that little diatribe. But I've heard people say, good people, well-intentioned people, saying things which, in my opinion, exclude them from the religion and make them not a candidate for the world to come. They're losing everything by saying something which is heresy. We don't play around with heresy. Very careful with this. The soul is similar to God. It's godly. It's elevated. It's God's portion, you can even say. It's not a piece of God. That excludes you from our religion. Okay, diatribe over. The soul is so holy. It's so elevated. It's so pure. And where is it placed? Inside the most lowly and putrid location. The soul that was created during the 6 days of Genesis. The soul that sees from one end of the world to the other. The soul that was in the garden. The soul that was at Sinai. It's put in a putrid body, a physical body. It's the most degrading experience for the soul. And the Midrash describes what happens. The soul is rebelling. The soul's kicking and screaming. The soul doesn't want this union. It's so embarrassing for the soul to be placed, to be married, to be merged with the body. It objects to this. And in fact, our sages tell us that if not for God making sure the soul doesn't escape, every time you breathe out, the soul really wants to escape. You breathe out, the soul's like, okay, this is my freedom. Push back in. Tens of thousands of times a day, the soul makes a move to escape. It can't bear the thought that it is submerged in a physical, animalistic body. But the soul's a candle, and the candle is lit, and the candle is within a person. And during 9 months of gestation, the candle is still on the baby's head, meaning the soul is primary within a person. And that's why the soul knows the whole Torah in utero, because the soul contains within it all holiness. Torah is synonymous with the soul. The soul knows Torah innately without even a teacher. And the soul is on the head. It captures the child's consciousness in utero. But the angel comes and with birth slaps the baby on his mouth and submerges the soul. And now the soul, like the verse tells us in Proverbs, the soul, the candle of God, is within a person, but it's deep in the innards. It's harbored in the most innermost chambers of the body. The light of the candle, the blazing light of the soul, is buried. It's deep, deep, deep within a person, and it's searching to try to find a way out. It's in the innards. It's lost. Its light does not emanate forth. Its light is effectively snuffed out. The light of the soul is effectively extinguished within a person. All that incredible power, that immense power, the thing which is most similar to God and loftier and more similar to God than even the angels, it's within a person, and they have no clue about it. They're totally ignorant to it. Not even one drop of their soul, of that light emanates forth. It's there. And it's implanted with all of Torah. And it's extant and it's pure and it's intact and it's unadulterated, but it's buried. The access of a person to their soul has been severed. So for all practical purposes, child forgets the Torah, child forgets their soul, child doesn't even, you can live a whole life and never once even acknowledge that you have a soul within you. Never feel it, never sense it. Your connection with it has been severed. but it's there. Deep within the innermost chambers of man lies a soul that is bursting with holiness and is awaiting to be unearthed. This is the architecture of our mission in life. All the holiness and all the Torah and all the greatness that we could ever dream of is already within us. It's there. It's present within us. The candle of God, the soul of man, is within us. It's present within us already. We're already more connected to the Almighty than we could possibly fathom. Prophecy. We think of prophecy at some lofty level. We have it. We're all prophets. If you just look at our soul within us, we're prophets. But the access to it has been severed. It's buried within the dark abyss. The candle is buried. The darkness has snuffed out the light. What is the architecture of our mission? To access that powerful beacon, that soul, and bring it forth. This is the light of Chanukah. And as we shall see, it's also the light of Shabbos. The verse tells us, verse 2 in Genesis, that there's darkness that's represented by the Greeks, but it's already present since the beginning of creation. It's a feature that's baked into Genesis. The land was empty and desolate and dark. And what's the darkness? It's the darkness of the Edzal of the Greeks. The force embodied by the Greeks, that's one of the major obstacles that the Almighty implanted in the world. The idea of darkness, where the light of the soul is not present. It's buried deep, deep within us. The powerful, the brilliant light, it's there. But there's just darkness. When we describe our mission in life, the architecture, we have that soul, bring it forth. It's within your innermost chambers. It used to be on your head. It used to be completely unrestrained. It was placed within a person, and it's buried and suppressed deep within them. Our mission is to bring that out. And Torah mitzvahs are there to elicit the soul, to have the soul, the little tiny points of light, to start penetrating that vast and intense and thick darkness that enshrouds it. The Greeks embodied this darkness. They represented this darkness that, yes, was always present. But the idea that we have a soul and it's so powerful and brilliant, and we're supposed to bring it out, they said, no. We want darkness. We are embracing the darkness. That's why they embraced the body. Where's the soul? The soul's not present. It was the body that mattered in their eyes. They embodied this darkness. Torah mitzvahs, that's the powers, the forces that can help bring the soul out of its abyss. Greeks banned it. They prohibited it. No study of Torah. No circumcision. No mitzvos. We are embracing the darkness. We are amplifying the already existing challenge of life. Since Genesis verse 2, there's been some element, some degree of darkness. The Greeks are embracing that. So we have a mission in life. There's darkness, bring out the light. There's light, but it's hidden, bring it forth. Use all the tools that God gives us to take that light that we have and allow it to surface. The Talmud tells us that this world is compared to darkness. Why? Because in this world, we start off and there's no light. And it's compared to darkness, but it could be changed. We can usher in daybreak to this world. We can bring the soul to the surface like Abraham did. We can awaken and unearth this beacon of light within us and let its light shine forth. Torah mitzvahs are the tools to elevate ourselves, to elevate the soul first. And once the soul comes forth, it spreads everywhere. And it changes even our body. Even our body can become just a vessel, a vehicle for the soul. We can have this light be a light to everyone, even to the distant nations. This is what the Hasmoneans did. They restored Torah mitzvos. They brought back the candle of mitzvos and the light of Torah to the nation. Amid the punishing and seemingly impenetrable darkness, the brilliant light of the soul burst forth. This is the state of life in our world. By default, there's darkness. By default, our soul is hidden underneath labyrinthine layers of darkness. The Greeks tried to cement that darkness and eliminate even the pursuit of light. But our mission, and the mission that was championed by the Hasmoneans, is to unearth the soul and bring its light from within and have it shine outwardly. That's our world. There's a very different world. The world is called Olam Haba, the world to come. And there's a very different architecture of that world. Here there's darkness, but there's a possibility, a potential of light. You have to work to bring it to the surface. In Olam Haba, there's no darkness. In fact, when the Talmud tries to find some comparison to Olam Haba, it says the sun. If you just follow the sun everywhere, there's no darkness. We experience darkness because we don't see the sun all the time. But the sun itself is just light. Our world is a world of darkness with the potential of light. The world to come is a world of just light. The idea of the soul being suppressed and buried and relegated to the inside, and it's hidden, and it's completely enclosed by default, that's this world. In the world to come, the soul is completely unsheathed. Darkness is eliminated. So we have two worlds and a vastly different structure in place. This world is the world of darkness. We need to do all the heavy lifting to take the light of our soul, to access it, and to let its radiance beam forth. In Olam Haba, there's no darkness. So we have light and we have light. But which light is greater? The light that we can work to bring about here, or the light in the world to come? This is how God comforted Aaron. In our world, it's a world of darkness with the possibility of light. In the world to come, it's just light. And there's an embassy of the world to come here, did you know? There's one point in this world that operates as if it's the world to come. That is the temple. That is the tabernacle. Our sages tell us that the temple, it's a little embassy, a consulate. It's a measure of the world to come. In the words of the Talmud, Jerusalem below is situated beneath Jerusalem of above. And that's the gateway to heaven. The verse in Parshas Vayisei tells us it's the gateway to heaven, Shara Shemayim. So it's not really all of Olam Haba, but it's like the gateway. It's the entrance point. There were miracles in the temple. Every day there were miracles in the temple. There was no darkness. But that's not very special. You know what's special? When there's complete darkness and you bring forth a ray of light. Aaron is told, yours is greater than theirs. The Hasmonean Chanukah is greater than the original inauguration of the temple of the tabernacle. To ignite your own flame amidst a sea, a desert, galaxies of darkness. That's way more impressive, a much greater accomplishment than to have a divine flame made for you. It's true. There were ever-present miracles in the temple, and we don't make a big deal about it, because that world's not a dark world. There's just light. Of course there's just light. To have a miracle, a point of light amidst darkness, to unearth a dormant soul from within, to conjure the fire from within, to have Chanukah, amidst the darkness, that is a truly transformational miracle. The temple was defiled. The temple had lost its holiness. And the Hasmoneans come and they find one little point, one little vial that they discover. And they unearth, and they have it burst forth. There's a prayer that we say during the Amidah for the duration of Hanukkah and during the grace after the meal, Birkas Hamazon, where we describe the miracles of Hanukkah. Ufinu es heichalecha, they cleared out your sanctuary. V'ti haruz mikdashecha, they took the temple and they purified it. V'hidliku neiros, and they lit the menorah, the candles of the menorah, bechatzros tachecha, in the courtyards of your holiness. Where was the menorah lit? It was lit inside the sanctuary, in the Kodesh. Here it says it was lit in the courtyard. Bechatzros kachecha. The prayer tells us that when they lit the Hanukkah candles, it was not where it was typically lit. It wasn't in the temple proper. It was in the courtyard. The sanctuary was all defiled. They were not really where they should have been. They were outside. They were here in this world, in the world of darkness. They weren't in the embassy of Olam Haba. They were amidst a sea of darkness. And they brought light. Aaron, yours is greater than theirs. The rededication of the temple at the hands of the Hasmoneans, of the Maccabees, is greater than the Mishkan, the name of the temple, first temple, second temple. Because that banished the darkness and brought light where darkness previously was. Our mission is to bring light, the light of God, the light of Torah, the light of our soul, and to have it take over everything, to eliminate the darkness embodied by the Greeks ever since verse 2 of Genesis. This light comes in two varieties. There's light amid the darkness. There's light from within. It was covered, but you uncovered it. The light that batters through resistance. And then there's the light of the world to come. The light without any resistance. And we have two mitzvahs relating to light. One for each type of light. The Shabbos candles and the Chanukah candles. And when do we light these? Chanukah candles must be lit at night. It's dark, and that's when you light. And Shabbos candles must be lit by day. It's light, and you're expressing the light of light. Shabbos is a measure of the world to come. Me'ein olam haba. Shabbos light the temple. It's an embassy of the world to come. The light of the Shabbos candles is the light of olam haba. The light of consumption. The lights of Hanukkah. Lights that come from amidst the darkness. Lights of this world. To bring out the penetrating light of our soul into the world of darkness. Shabbos, you have to have light inside. Hanukkah, it's about projecting it outwardly. You have the light within you, bring it to the darkness that exists outside. Shabbos is inwardly facing. Hanukkah is outwardly facing. If you don't have lights, it's very important. You must get these lights. You don't have any money, go beg. But on Hanukkah, it's not enough to beg. You have to sell the shirt on your back. The body and soul, it's comparable to the body and clothing. The body is like clothing for the soul. As it tells you have to sell your body, sell your garments. You have to get rid of your bodiness. Get rid of that blockade of darkness. Embrace your existence as a soul. That's how you do it. You want to have the mitzvah of Hanukkah? Sell your garment. The garment to your soul. Realize that there's a garment that's enshrouding your soul and preventing its light from shining forth. Our mitzvah is to ignite the light. If we do our job, that's all we need to worry about. We don't need to worry about it emitting light. Our focus now is on ourselves inside. Access that light, ignite it, bring it forth. Chanukah candles, you have to light them. What if a wind comes and blows out the candle? That's not your job. You have to worry about it giving light. That's God's job. Your job is to ignite it. And every person has to find what they can do. Some can do more, some can do less. That's our mission over here. None of us can shirk our responsibilities. Some people just light one light. Some people know we have to light one night for every person. And some have to do one night for every person, and every night you're increasing and increasing. Our mission here is very different. There's variability. We're not all the same. But this is because it's Chanukah, to reveal the latent light amid the darkness. There's a point in time. There's a reality. There's a future where there is no darkness. In the world to come, we'll have the light of Shabbos. But you know what's even greater? To discover, to unearth, to expose the soul that's been covered up, to have that beaming beacon of light that's within us, and to bring it out, and to have it project into the night, like God told Aaron. It's way greater. The story of Chanukah, the mitzvah of Chanukah, the miracle of Chanukah shows us what we're here to do. This is a description of our responsibility. In a world of darkness, we have an opportunity to do something that we cannot do once the darkness is eliminated. Only today we can discover that light within us. And yes, it's not easy, of course, this is much harder. But to take one tiny point of light from within and to have it go outwardly, as God told Aaron, yes, the holiness of the temple, first temple, second temple, Mishkan, it's much greater than what the Hasmoneans did. They did it outside. It wasn't even the right place. But to do it on your own, nothing can match that. May we all be so fortunate as to take to heart the lesson of Chanukah, to realize that we have this beacon within us, we have this incredible light within us, to understand that the Almighty designed the world so that we have the opportunity to contribute some light. The darkness, that's a feature of creation. That's what He wanted. He wanted us to have the opportunity to partner with Him, to bring light to the world. The Hasmoneans showed us what it looks like. They took the darkness of the Greeks and they blasted a light into the darkness. We can do the same. We have 8 days to think about it, to look at it, to gaze at the lights of the Chanukah candles in the darkness, projecting outwardly, to realize that we have a candle within us. The candle of God is within ourselves. Deeply buried, yes, but it's still there, and we can unearth it. May we all be so fortunate. I appreciate your attention. Have a wonderful, happy, productive, uplifting Chanukah. And as always, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback. Nay, I cherish your questions, your comments, and your feedback. rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.